Stop scrolling for 1 second, because this headline, "Furious World Leaders Finally Ban Trump Over War Crimes," is one of the most viral, emotionally weaponized pieces of political clickbait circulating online right now. And before you like it, share it, or cite it in an argument, you owe it to yourself to understand exactly what's true, what's fabricated, and what's far more terrifying than any headline could capture. The post originates from MeidasTouch, a progressive digital media network founded in April 2020 by three brothers from Long Island, Ben, Brett, and Jordan Meiselas, who built their entire brand around one explicit mission: protecting American democracy, defeating Trumpism, and holding Republicans accountable, and who have since been rated by multiple independent media analysts as operating in the hyper-partisan left category, with analysts rating them as left-biased with mixed factual reporting due to one-sided content and limited funding transparency. Meaning, this is not a news organization in any traditional sense. It is a politically motivated content machine optimized to make you angry enough to hit share before you hit pause. And the headline in question does exactly that, by stating something that simply did not happen. No world leader has formally banned Donald Trump personally. No international body has issued an arrest warrant against him. No travel restriction targeting Trump as an individual has been enacted by any nation. And in fact, the real-world story running in the opposite direction is that it is the Trump administration itself that has limited or barred entry into the United States for people from almost 20% of the countries in the world, targeting Muslim majority, black majority, and African nations in an immigration crackdown that rights groups around the globe have condemned as discriminatory and legally dubious. So the irony of a headline screaming that world leaders banned Trump is almost surreal, given that the actual banning happening on the international stage is coming from Washington, not toward it. Now here is where the story gets genuinely serious, deeply documented, and bipartisan in its alarm. Because while the headline is fiction, the fire burning beneath it is absolutely real and has been verified by major news organizations, international law institutions, and over 100 international legal scholars who signed an open letter. President Donald Trump said the United States would target every Iranian bridge and power plant, and experts say such blanket action violates international law. To understand how we got here, you need the full context. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a military campaign against Iran that killed Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. And in the months since, Iran's counterattacks struck U.S. bases across the Gulf, strategic Gulf infrastructure, and drastically slowed shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, causing a global shortage of oil and energy supplies, sending gas prices in the U.S. skyrocketing. In response to Iran's closure of the strait, a waterway carrying roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply, Trump issued a series of increasingly escalating threats that stunned legal scholars, alarmed allied nations, and crossed lines that even some of the president's own supporters refused to defend. On Truth Social, Trump wrote, "Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the Efkin Strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell." And then the following morning, he posted a message that sent shockwaves through every international law institution on the planet. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. A statement that Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Callamard called a staggering level of cruelty and disregard for human life, warning that it brazenly shreds core rules of international humanitarian law with potentially catastrophic consequences for over 90 million people. When reporters directly asked Trump whether he was concerned about committing war crimes, he rejected the premise entirely, arguing that Iran's leaders were animals who needed to be stopped. And when pressed further by a reporter who cited the Geneva Conventions, Trump reportedly responded, "I hope I don't have to do it," before arguing that the mere possibility of a nuclear Iran is so intolerable that it justifies breaking international law. Legal scholars across the political spectrum lined up to explain why this posture is not just morally disturbing, but legally indefensible under frameworks the United States itself helped build after World War II. Yale law professor Una Hathaway explained that the threat to destroy civilian infrastructure and to destroy a whole civilization clearly violates the Geneva Conventions because it is not connected to any lawful military objective, and that the basic principle of international humanitarian law requires states engaging in use of force to distinguish between combatants and civilians, targeting only military objectives, a principle Trump's blanket threats explicitly abandon. Another legal expert put it even more plainly. The threat to destroy civilian infrastructure at scale is really suggesting that the president is announcing no distinction between civilian and military objects, and explicit statements about targeting infrastructure without that kind of distinction means abandoning the constraints that international law requires. But concern wasn't merely theoretical. U.S. and Israeli forces attacked civilian infrastructure, including power plants, bridges, universities, steel factories, and petrochemical facilities, killing and injuring civilians. And Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had already publicly dismissed what he called tepid legality in favor of maximum lethality, while pledging during a press briefing that U.S. forces would show no quarter, no mercy for our enemies, a statement legal experts noted is itself a potential violation of the laws of war, because the laws of war try to prohibit exactly those kinds of statements from military leaders. What makes this moment historically extraordinary, and what the Midas Touch headline completely buries under its manufactured outrage, is that the war crimes debate was not a left versus right argument. It was a nearly universal alarm bell sounded from every direction. Former Republican Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a longtime Trump ally, implied invoking the 25th Amendment and posted that not a single bomb has dropped on America. We cannot kill an entire civilization. This is evil and madness. While more than 70 Democratic lawmakers echoed the call, and even conspiracy theorist Alex Jones posted war crime alert. The United Nations weighed in directly, with UN Secretary-General spokesman Stéphane Dujarric stating clearly, if there's an attack on clearly civilian infrastructure, that is not allowed under international humanitarian law. Several world governments did privately push back, with Pakistan, Egypt, and Turkey all acting as mediators between the U.S. and Iran, while several countries privately warned the Trump administration against such attacks, though most avoided publicly rebuking the U.S. president, which is a critical distinction the viral headline completely ignores. Private diplomatic concern and public outrage from allied governments is a very real thing happening right now, but it is categorically different from a formal ban on Trump. And conflating the two is exactly the kind of emotionally satisfying but factually hollow reporting that poisons public discourse on both sides. The accountability gap is equally real and equally alarming. The Trump administration has imposed sanctions against judges of the International Criminal Court and is pressuring the court to drop its investigations of Israeli leaders over the war in Gaza, as well as its investigation into U.S. military actions in Afghanistan. And the United States is not a party to the Rome Statute. And despite Washington's historic role in building the post-war international legal architecture, the current administration has made no secret of its hostility toward the institutions that architecture produced, meaning the very courts that would hold any nation accountable for war crimes are being actively dismantled and defunded by the administration being accused of those crimes, a recursive nightmare that legal scholars describe as unprecedented in the post-World War II era. What has fundamentally changed in this conflict, according to analysts, is the swaggering contempt from the United States, Israel, and Iran as they dismiss, mock, or flout the international laws protecting civilians. And if the international community does not urgently reassert support for those norms, it may be acquiescing to their destruction. The situation did ultimately pull back from its most catastrophic brink. Trump agreed to suspend the bombing of Iran for a period of 2 weeks on the condition that Iran reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran agreed to allow safe passage of marine traffic through the strait.
But the legal and moral damage done by openly threatening to annihilate civilian infrastructure as a negotiating tactic by a sitting U.S. president on a public social media platform with the explicit statement that he was not at all concerned about war crimes is something no ceasefire erases from the international record. The bottom line is this: MeidasTouch is a hyper-partisan outlet rated as mixed on factual reliability that took a genuinely catastrophic, bipartisan, historically significant international crisis and wrapped it in a fictional headline designed to generate maximum dopamine hits among its base. Because every day, MeidasTouch videos get more than 1 million views, and the brothers quickly realized that from the point of view of engagement, Trump was a gift. Meaning your outrage, your share, and your click are their revenue model. And the actual human beings in Iran living under the threat of having their civilization bombed into darkness deserve better than to be reduced to fuel for a content machine's engagement metrics. The war crimes debate is real. The legal concerns are verified by the most credible institutions on Earth. The erosion of international humanitarian law is happening in real time and affects every future conflict on the planet. But none of that moral urgency is served by a fake headline, because when the title is a lie, everyone who fact-checks it gets to dismiss the entire story. And that is how the most important accountability conversation of our time gets swallowed whole by the very media ecosystem that claims to be fighting for truth.